Hello, fellow Yu-Gi-Oh fans. Welcome to my very first deck build and strategy guide video, featuring by majority vote, the playful tricksters of the haunted night, the delightful dwellers of darkness, Ghostricks. In this video, I'll be detailing specific monster, spell, and trap cards I use in my build, as well as a few strategies and combos I've learned over the years, some of which have surprised even me. So without further ado, let's get started. Now to start, I won't describe every card in the archetype, just the ones that I use. I'll also sort the cards into two categories, the essentials and the supports. Now the Ghostricks are primarily an XC deck, whose monsters have levels and ranks from 1 to 4. They also share the same monster types depending on their level, or rank. Level and rank 1s are fiends, level and rank 2s along with their link are spellcasters, level and rank 3s are zombies, and level and rank 4s are fairies. Additionally, all monsters in the main deck share the effect that they cannot be normal summoned unless you control another face-up Ghostrick monster. They also have the ability to flip themselves face down once per turn. That plays into their main gimmick, an endless game of peekaboo, scaring the opponent's monsters in order to disrupt them. Okay, let's start with the essential monster cards, beginning at the lowest level, 1. First, we have Ghostrick Mary, based on the well-known Bloody Mary. I won't go into that story, but I'll warn you not to say her name 3 times in the mirror. I mean, just look at her artwork. Like the other level 1 monsters, she functions as a hand trap when certain conditions are met. In her case, when you take any kind of damage, battle, or effect, you can discard her from your hand and special summon any other Ghostrick monster from the deck face down. The downside is, she can only use it once per turn. Be sure to keep her at 3. Next up is Ghostrick Jack Frost, based on the popular character Jack Frost, usually portrayed as the embodiment of winter. Though I vaguely remember that there was a horror movie based on him too. Anyway, when your opponent declares a direct attack, his effect allows you to flip the attacking monster face down while also special summoning himself face down. Always keep him at 3. Next, we move on to the level 2 monsters, or monster, in this case, Ghostrick Doll. When she's flipped face up, her effect allows her to flip every monster on the field face down during the turn's end phase, before special summoning another Ghostrick from the deck face down, whose level is less than or equal to the number of monsters that were flipped. Keep her at 3. After Doll, we move on to the level 3 monsters, or again, monster, Ghostrick Mummy. His effect grants an additional normal summon of a Ghostrick monster, while also preventing you from special summoning non-dark attribute monsters. He's not as impressive as the other Ghostricks effect-wise, but keep him at 3. Next is level 4, but unlike the previous 3 levels, there can be only 1, because the only level 4 monster in the deck is Ghostrick Siren, whose hypnotic voice has been said to lead sailors astray. When she's summoned or flipped face up, her effect allows her to send 2 cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard, and provided at least one of those cards is a Ghostrick, she can either add a Ghostrick spell or trap from the deck to the hand, or sing an opponent's effect monster to sleep. Finally, we get to the extra deck monsters. We have the rank 1 Ghostrick Duel, based on the Headless Horseman, the rank 2 Ghostrick So Cute Boss, based on the infamous demon the Succubus, though she seems more interested in sleeping than sleeping around, the rank 3 Ghostrick Alucard. I'm sure most anime fans and YouTubers know who he's based on, and that he likes to take very enthusiastic walks. Above him is the rank 4 Ghostrick Angel of Mischief. And finally, we have literally every monster in the archetype all merged into one, the Ghostrick Festival. I'll elaborate on their effects later, it'll make things easier. Keep each of them at 3. Now that the monsters are out of the way, let's move on to the essential spells and trap cards. Now the deck has 3 field spells, and all 3 share the same primary effect. Face down monsters can be targeted for attacks, but direct attacks can be made if the opponent's monsters are all in face down defense position. They also each have an additional effect to compensate for the first. There's also a clever bit of logic behind said effects. One of my favorite things about the Ghostrick spells and traps is how well their artwork either emphasizes their effects or shows us just how much character the monsters have. For example, the first essential card in this part of the list is the Ghostricks home turf, their field spell, Ghostrick Mansion. Mansion's secondary effect has all effect damage and battle damage caused by non-Ghostrick monsters. The reason is simple. They're on their home turf, a haunted house, giving them the home field advantage and intimidating whoever invades their domain. Keep this one at 3. The final card for this part is the trap card Ghostrick Scare. It's probably the most essential card in the deck. Its effect allows you to target as many of your face-down monsters as you like, flip them face up, and then flip up to the same amount of monsters your opponent controls face down. Always carry 3. Now that the essentials are out of the way, we can move on to the backbone of the deck, the support cards. Just like the essentials, we'll start with the monsters from the lowest level and work our way up. First up, we have the level 1 Ghostrick Lantern. As mentioned earlier, level 1 Ghostrick monsters act as hand traps when certain conditions are met. In the case of Lantern, when your opponent targets another Ghostrick monster for an attack or tries to attack you directly, his effect negates that attack and special summons him face down. Next on the list is the level 1 Bedsheet Ghost, Ghostrick Spectre. His hand trap effect activates when a Ghostrick monster you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, allowing you to special summon him face down and then draw 1 card. Really lives up to his name, doesn't he? Now we move on to the level 2 monsters. I may have forgotten to mention this earlier, but the level 2 Ghostricks have their own specialty, similar to the level 1s. In this case, they're the ones you'll primarily be using to flip your opponent's monsters face down. The first level 2 monster, who in my opinion is the best in the deck, is Ghostrick Nekomusume, or Cat Girl. Her effect can only activate and resolve if another face-up Ghostrick monster is on the field. Still, she'll automatically flip all your opponent's level 4 or higher monsters face down as soon as they're summoned. See why I said she's the best? Next up is the level 2 Ghostrick Fairy. Her effect is similar to that of Doll, but unlike Doll, Fairy's effect resolves a lot faster. When she's flipped face up, you can target 1 Ghostrick card in the graveyard and set it to the field, and then you can flip your opponent's monsters face down up to the number of face down cards you control. The only downside is that the card you set with her effect gets banished once it leaves the field. Now we get back to the level 3 monsters. Unlike the level 1 and 2 Ghostricks, they don't have a level-based theme, but they do have various valuable effects. The first one is Ghostrick Jiangshi, based on the Chinese hopping vampire of the same name. Even Capcom has a character or 2 based on it. When he's flipped face up, you can add a Ghostrick monster whose level is less than or equal to the number of Ghostrick monsters you currently control from your deck to the hand. After him, we have a level 3 Ghostrick Skeleton, because no horror-based deck is complete without a Grim Reaper. Like Jiangshi, he also has a flip effect. When he's flipped face up, you can banish cards from the top of your opponent's deck up to or equal to the number of Ghostricks monsters you currently control. The following 2 are interchangeable, so you can keep one or the other in the deck, or one of each if it suits you. The first one is the level 3 Mutt Ghostrick Warwolf. When he's flipped face up, it deals 100 points of damage for each set card on the field. After him, it's the Cryptid of the North, the level 3 Ghostrick Yeti. When he's flipped face up, you can target another Ghostrick monster you control and make it immune to destruction from battle and card effects. Our next monster is a literal zombie, the ever-decaying Ghostrick Ghoul. His effect allows you to target a Ghostrick monster you control and make its attack points equal to the combined attack points of all the Ghostrick monsters on the field. The catch is that only the monster who gained the attack boost can attack that turn, but the attack boost persists until the end of your opponent's next turn. Equivalent exchange, I guess. Next up is a monster who I'm sure needs no formal introduction, the level 3 Ghostrick Stein. Obviously based on the character of Frankenstein's monster from Mary Shelley's infamous novel. When he deals battle damage to your opponent, you can add a Ghostrick spell or trap from the deck to your hand. Moving on from the monsters, we'll get to the fun part, the support spells and trap cards. The first 2 will be the remaining field spells and their secondary effects. Starting with Ghostrick Parade, its effect lets you add 1 Ghostrick card from your deck to your hand when your opponent declares a direct attack. I assume that's because with all of them being present, one can easily sneak away from all the excitement to give the rest a chance to gain the advantage. Our final field spell is filled with a few rather eerie sights, the Ghostrick Museum. Filled with all kinds of hiding places and breakable objects, any monster that deals battle damage while this card is on the field is flipped face down out of the damage step. The opponent's monster breaks something, they get scared out of their wits. Meanwhile, the Ghostricks do their thing before returning to hiding. Fun. The final spell is the relatively new and dangerous looking Ghostrick Shot. It's also the only non-field spell in the entire deck. The card actually has two different effects. The first serves as one of the archetype's exclusive monster reborns, allowing you to special summon a Ghostrick monster from either your graveyard or your hand before allowing you to flip a face down Ghostrick monster you control to face up attack position. The following effect, which I'm 60% sure is what the card's art references, is banishing the spell for cost, allowing you to target a Ghostrick Exceed monster you control and attach a Ghostrick card from the graveyard onto it. Moving on, we get to the true power behind the deck, the trap cards. First up, we have Alucard's Midnight Walk, Ghostrick Vanish. By revealing a Ghostrick monster in your hand, the Ghostrick cards you control and your face-down defense position monsters become immune to targeting and effect destruction for the rest of the turn. I was going to save this tidbit for later, but if you set this card, use it as soon as possible. Next, we have what looks to be a very tragic love triangle brewing. Poor Yeti. Like Shot, this card is an exclusive monster reborn for the deck. When exactly one face-up Ghostrick monster is sent to the graveyard after being destroyed by battle or by an opponent's card effect, you can target two other Ghostrick monsters in the graveyard and special summon them face down. The newest addition to the trap card arsenal is the most appropriately named card in the deck, given its theme, Ghostrick or Treat. So long as you control a Ghostrick Link or field spell, you can target one monster your opponent controls and give them a choice. They can either provide the treat of 2,000 life points to negate the card's effects and set it again, which would explain why Werewolf is behind Angel and So Cute boss looking intimidating, or accept the trick and have their monster's effects negated and rendered unable to attack for the rest of the turn, before it gets flipped face down during the end phase. Moving on to the final normal trap on the list, at least for the archetype, we have the Ghostrick crew working on their Ghostrick renovation. However, which seems to be having a difficult time organizing everything. When the renovation starts, you can target the Ghostrick field spell in your field spell zone, return it to your hand, and activate another field spell from either your hand or your deck. Additionally, when renovation is in the graveyard, you can banish it, target a Ghostrick Exceed monster you control, and use it to special summon a different one from the extra deck. It also counts as an Exceed summon, and you get to keep the overlay units. Now we move on to the continuous traps, starting with the dizzying Ghostrick Go round. Only applicable during the battle phase, this card has two effects. First, you can target a face-up Ghostrick monster you control and flip it face down before changing a face-down monster your opponent controls into face-up attack position. Alternatively, you can do the opposite. Target a face down and flip it into face-up attack position before flipping a face-up monster your opponent controls face down, but only if your flip monster is a Ghostrick. I got dizzy just from saying all that. The final trap is none other than the ever-frightening Ghostrick Knight. With the Ghostricks pulling out all the stops, this card prevents your opponent from flipping their face-down monsters face-up so long as there's at least one face-up Ghostrick monster on the field. Its second effect activates when your opponent destroys it and sends it to the graveyard, rendering your opponent's monsters unable to attack for the rest of the turn. Now that we've finished the archetypal cards, we can finally get to the last two, the generic back row removers, Heavy Storm Duster, and Harpy's Feather Duster. Jack in the Hand is also a good backup to have if you can fit it in. Maybe put it in place of Yeti or Werewolf. Your choice. Now that the card list has been completed, we can finally get to the fun part, the strategy guide. As I'm sure you've already noticed, this build has a relatively high card count, 60 in fact, and doesn't rely on hand traps like Ash Blossom, Maxi, or even the common spell Called by the Grave. That's because I wanted to put in, and preserve, as much of the deck's power as possible. Incidentally, I learned that because this build is fundamentally different from what most would expect, by which I mean it's built to be played the way it's supposed to be, Players will have a much harder time predicting your moves, and since they're unlikely to encounter the deck so often, especially now, the element of surprise provides you with an early advantage. As I mentioned, the Ghostricks are primarily an Exceed deck, and they rely on a multitude of different tactics in order to win, including milling, burning, lockdown, and even an alternate win condition. Though in my opinion, the alternate win condition is a bit impractical, though not completely impossible to pull off if you're clever enough. The Ghostricks as a whole can only be described as weak but skilled, as they have very little attack power, their highest being 2,000 attack points, and rely heavily on their effects to pull through rather than brute force. However, the wide variety of effects that they have makes countering them tricky, especially once they've established a field presence. A common problem I've seen in several builds, not just Ghostricks, is that so many of them are built at only a fraction of their power, so they can be used as engines for generic extra deck summons or for better consistency. My primary goal with this video is to show that the Ghostricks and other rogue decks are strong enough on their own without having to be reduced to engines to stay relevant. In fact, this build has beaten Scareclaw, Kashtira, and even a mostly full board of Egyptian gods despite their playstyle. There are quite a few strategies for this deck, but I know exactly where to start. With most decks, you usually do everything you can and keep your life points as high as possible, but this deck often requires you to take damage to gain the advantage, high risk, high reward. So being able to manipulate your field spells will be one of the most essential methods for winning. The most efficient way to explain this is to list which monsters best suit each field spell. Starting with Parade, we have Lantern, Mary, Jack Frost, and Mummy. Since Parade prevents your opponent from taking any kind of damage, battle, or effect, you'll only need it active on your opponent's turn, specifically their battle phase, in order to add the cards you need. The first three, being hand traps for the battle phase, work for all the field spells, technically, but they work best, in my opinion at least, with Parade the most, so they should be top priority when being added to the hand, if they're not there already. In that case, you should decide which of them you need depending on what you're dealing with. For example, in this duel against Egyptian gods, I have Jack Frost in my hand when the battle phase starts, so I was able to use both Parade and Jack Frost's effect to add Lantern and protect myself from what could have been a devastating blow to my life points, respectively. Then by adding Mary and letting myself take the hit, I used her effect to summon the monster that I needed for my next turn, while giving myself a chance to stop the other potential attacks by repeating the cycle of adding and preventing. This is easy since both Jack Frost and Lantern's effect can be used several times per turn. As for Mummy, since he provides an additional normal summon, he can be used on your next turn to summon another monster from your hand, either for an effect or an overlay unit for a potential Exceed summon. Again, it all depends on what you're dealing with at the time. The next field spell we'll deal with is Museum. Of the three field spells, you'll be using this one the least. In all honesty, this card is better off as a last resort, at least on your opponent's turn, since it'll automatically flip any non-linked monsters that deal battle damage. The monsters that best suit this field spell, there are quite a few, are Doll, Fairy, Skeleton, Werewolf, Jiangshi, Yeti, and Siren. See the pattern? All of these monsters have flip effects, meaning you can deal damage with them, have them flipped, and if you have the means, flip them again and use their effects if you haven't already. Museum, like the others, will also protect them from battle, but due to the risk, I'd highly recommend having some support ready to mitigate it. As for Mansion, since it's the field spell you'll be using the most, it technically works with all the monsters, since it's the only one that lets you deal full damage without repercussions and keeps the damage you take relatively low. However, if I had to choose, I'd say that Stein, Ghoul, Alucard, Dullahan, So Cute Boss, Angel, and Festival work best with it. Stein works because he can deal a good amount of damage while using his effect to add a much needed spell or trap to your hand, and Ghoul can maximize the amount of damage you can inflict in a single turn. In fact, Ghoul is a part of some of the most devastating combos I've seen in this deck. As for the extra deck monsters, I think it's time to finally give them their due, otherwise it'll be difficult to move forward. So we'll start with the Link 1 Ghostrick Festival. Fitting for the deck, it's the only Link monster in the game, as far as I'm aware, that can be Link summoned using a face-down monster. Seeing people shocked when I do it in a TCG is always priceless. This monster is super helpful because it allows Ghostrick monsters to attack directly, if there's a Ghostrick field spell active. But unlike the field spells, your opponent's monsters don't need to be face down. That's one of the ways they can overcome their weakness to other Link monsters, whom they can't flip or overpower. And since it's a Link monster, Museum doesn't affect it when it deals damage. Its second effect lets it tribute itself in order to special summon a Ghostrick monster from the deck face down when an opponent's monster declares an attack. Next is the rank 1 Ghostrick Duel. Since he gains 200 attack points for every Ghostrick card you control, his strength, while varied, is advantageous. With the potential to have 6 Ghostrick monsters on the field, plus the field spell, that's an additional 1400 extra attack points. And with the 2 continuous traps on the field, that would make his potential attack points 2800. Combine that with Ghoul's power boost and Festival's direct attack, and you'd be able to deal a significant amount of damage to your opponent. But that's not all. He also has an effect that allows him to detach an overlay unit to have the attack points of another monster on the field. Also, if he's sent to the graveyard, his third effect, which he shares with Alucard, allows him to target a Ghostrick card in the graveyard and return it to your hand. This comes in handy when properly exploited by another Exceed monster in the deck. After Dullahan comes the rank 2 So Cute boss. Now, I personally don't use her as much as the other extra deck monsters. In fact, I can't remember the last time I summoned her at all. However, that doesn't mean I'm ignorant of her capabilities. Quite the opposite, in fact. Her first effect makes her unable to be targeted by attacks if you control another Ghostrick monster. Her second effect lets you detach an overlay unit and target a monster on the field whose attack points are less than or equal to the combined attack of all Ghostricks on the field and destroy it. It also renders the monster zone that housed the destroyed monster unusable so long as you control a face-up Ghostrick monster. Now, if Ghoul is considered the hidden gem of the main deck, then So Cute Boss can be considered the same for the extra deck. In fact, combining Ghoul's effect with hers is a great way to not only get rid of a troublesome monster if attacking directly isn't an option, but get enough strong Ghostrick monsters on the field, use Ghoul to boost one, and then use So Cute Boss, and you can get rid of a monster that has, at most, double the original combined attack of your Ghostricks. Limiting the amount of space your opponent may need on their field, especially the extra monster zone you're not occupying, is a great bonus too. Alucard is next, so let's get started before he's forced to entertain himself. His first effect makes it so he's the only Ghostrick monster on your field that can be targeted for attacks. Face down monsters can't be targeted either. Incidentally, that means having 2 on the field will prevent your opponent from attacking, unless they're attacking directly. I think. His second effect lets you detach an overlay unit to destroy a set card your opponent controls, but you can only use it once per turn. His next effect, which isn't once per turn, lets you add a Ghostrick card from your graveyard to the hand if he's sent to the graveyard. I once pulled this off thrice in a single turn. And last but certainly not least, we have the Fallen Angel of Mischief. As a result of the deck not having a single level 4 monster until recently, she can be rank up summoned using another Ghostrick Exceed monster you control. She also possesses the deck's alternate win condition, being that you can instantly win the duel if she gets 10 overlay units. As I've said, it's a bit impractical, but not impossible to pull off. Her primary effect lets her detach an overlay unit to add a Ghostrick spell or trap from the deck to the hand once per turn. However, if you have multiple copies of her, they can each use the effect the same turn. The same goes for her last effect, which lets you attach a Ghostrick card from your hand to her as an overlay unit. Now that I've presented a few basic strategies for the deck involving the field spells and the extra deck monsters, I can finally go further with the combos that involve the only normal spell and the many trap cards in the deck. Since I'm sure this will be the most sought after strategy, I'll go over it first. Since Angel requires 10 overlay units to achieve the win, it'll take several turns for her to gain them. So your priority when attempting this should be to keep Angel safe for as long as possible, while also working on a way to keep your opponent at bay. The cards you'll need, aside from Angel obviously, are Mansion, Renovation, Shot, Trick or Treat, Scare, Go Round, and Vanish. See why I said it was impractical? For this build, I'd recommend getting Renovation into the graveyard as soon as possible, preferably using it to swap your field spell with Mansion. You should get Shot in there too, however you can. When you manage to get a Ghostrick Exceed monster on the field, like I did with Alucard here, using their effect is fine if it's needed since it can also bait out negation effects. If Shot is already in the graveyard, you can banish it to attach an overlay unit to that Exceed monster, before banishing Renovation to overlay over the same Exceed monster into a different one, but not Angel just yet. You'll summon her immediately after. You can then use her effect to attach an overlay unit to add whatever card you need from your deck to your hand, and then use her other effect to attach a new one from your hand. After that, Angel should have 4 to 5 overlay units, so you should prepare a back row that can keep her safe until your next turn. Provided you have at least one face-down Ghostrick on the field, along with Festival and Mansion, then Scare and Go Round will help protect her during the battle phase by flipping attacking non-linked monsters, or flipping her so she can't be attacked. Lantern is also good at stopping link attacks, while Trick or Treat can potentially stop an attack as well. Vanish will also keep her safe from targeting and destruction effects, and you can use another copy of Renovation in the graveyard to swap Angel out if you need to do so before your next turn. Provided your monsters survive to your next turn, you should be able to give Angel the remaining cards she needs before the turn ends. If not, you still have your next turn. The next few strategies I'll go over involve the deck's lockdown capabilities. As I said earlier, the level 2 monster's primary use is to flip the opponent's monsters face down, and thanks to their trap cards, there are several ways to keep them that way. The simplest being the use of Knight. The first combo I'll go over, which is my personal favorite, is shown here. It's the combination of Festival, Nekomusume, and Knight. Since most decks you'll be facing will be relying on high level and high rank monsters, this combo is a great way to hinder your opponent's access to their extra deck. Nekomusume's effect will automatically flip high level monsters, meaning Synchro, Exceed, and Link summons can be hindered due to lack of materials, and while her effect can't prevent fusion summons for obvious reasons, she can still flip the monsters that are summoned, providing it's level 4 or higher. Since Knight is the key to the deck's lockdown strategies, you should prioritize keeping it on the field for as long as possible. The use of Vanish is a great way to protect it, but even if it gets destroyed, it's still easy to get back from the graveyard thanks to the effects of Alucard and Duelahan. Siren and Angel can also procure one from the deck if you need it. Another lockdown strategy involving Knight combines the effects of Doll and Scare. It also works best if you have additional Ghostricks on your field face down, preferably Jiangshi, Skeleton, and Siren. If Scare is used to flip them, you'll be able to flip several of your opponent's monsters face down, while Doll's effect will ensure, at the very least, that your monsters will return to being set once the turn ends, letting you special summon a Ghostrick from the deck. The addition of Skeleton allows you to mill your opponent's deck, potentially getting rid of some essential resources they'll need, while Jiangshi and Siren will allow you to gather the resources you'll need, or alternatively, in Siren's case, flip an extra monster. A similar strategy can be used with Fairy and Go Round. Since Fairy works best when you have several set cards on your field, using Go Round to flip her face up during the battle phase is the most optimal choice. You can also go a step further by using Break. Since Go Round will make it so that Fairy is vulnerable to attacks, having her destroy will allow you to revive 2 essential monsters from the graveyard. And with that, we can finally get to the combos involving the deck's drawing, milling, and damage dealing strategies. Now, the common risk that most players see with decks that have a high card count is consistency, so they tend to keep the bare minimum of cards in their builds when possible. Unfortunately, they tend to have a bad habit of applying that logic to every deck that they build, which in my opinion is the height of folly, at least for decks like Ghostricks. Let me explain. The Ghostricks have a wide range of effects that they use in tandem with each other to not only gain the advantage, but also keep the opponent off balance, keeping the card count at the bare minimum of 40, or even at a max of 45 would severely limit what cards you can use, meaning that your options and adaptability will be lacking when it counts. However, as I learned when I first started building my Beast deck, long before Melfi's were released mind you, a high card count isn't that significant if the deck specializes in thinning itself out, meaning your consistency increases the longer the duel goes on. Additionally, if the deck can regularly search, summon, or even activate cards directly from the deck, the card count matters even less. By my count, this build has 9 cards that specialize in thinning the deck. those being Parade, Festival, Mary, Spectre, Doll, Jiangshi, Stein, Siren, and Angel of Mischief. 10 if you include the card that really needs a name change. Now, I've already explained how Parade and Mary work together, but I never included the other cards that can take things further, those being Scare and Go Round. Again, if your opponent has at least 4 monsters on their field that can attack, there's potentially 4 Ghostrick cards taken from the deck thanks to Parade's effect. If at least one of those cards is Mary, which it should be if it's not already in your hand, you can use her to summon Siren from the deck, and if your opponent chooses to keep attacking directly, you can chain Scare or Go Round to Parade's activation, flip Siren and one of the monsters your opponent controls, then use Siren's effect to mill 2 cards and then add the spell Trap you need. That's potentially 8 cards taken out in a single phase. Doll and Jiangshi could also work instead of Siren, but using Doll is a lot less practical due to the slow speed of her effect, and Jiangshi's effect has a chance to miss timing if you aren't careful, something I've learned the hard way more than once. The other monsters I mentioned don't require a complex strategy, but having several of them on the field at once is good because their effects can go off at different times. As I've said, so many different effects keeps your opponent off balance. As for Skeleton, since he technically mills, by which I mean he banishes cards from your opponent's deck, the only advice I can really give is to use him when you have as many Ghostricks on the field as possible. Combine him with Doll and Scare, you can banish out the 12 cards between your opponent's turn and your own. Alright, enough of that. Now we get to the fun part. Damage dealing. Since the archetype's attack power is weak, it relies on the ability to deal direct damage to chip away at the opponent's life points over a long period, which is still the case even after it's gotten its new support. On the plus side, it's now much easier to deal more damage in less time. Starting with the most straightforward combo, we have Warwolf, the only monster in the deck that deals burn damage. Like Fairy, he requires tech cards to be on the field for his effect to be useful, the more the better. But unlike Fairy, his effect uses the set cards your opponent controls as well as your own. The only problem is that Warwolf's effect can be hindered by Parade and Mansion. One nullifies all damage the opponent takes, the other greatly reduces it. This means you should only use it if you have no field spell active or if you're using Museum. Since they mainly deal battle damage through direct attacks, the best way to do so is by using Festival and a field spell that isn't Parade. There's a particular combo I love using every chance I get involving Festival and Ghoul's effects. Similar to the Succubus combo I mentioned earlier, by having as many Ghostricks on the field as possible, preferably the stronger ones, and using Ghoul's effect to boost Festival's attack points, you'll have the chance to deal a ton of direct damage that your opponent is unlikely to be prepared for. I call it the Ghostrick Stampede. And since the attack boost lasts until the end of your opponent's next turn, you can flip the rest of your Ghostricks, if possible, face down, while using Festival as a shield. And that's most of the combos and strategies I've been able to come up with for the deck. There are a few more, but I think it's more fun to let you all test the deck out and see what you can come up with. Now for the final part of this video, the deck's final stats. For this, I'll assign rankings based on 3 major categories I believe are essential for any deck, that being their overall strength, their adaptability, and how well they can recover, with 1 card being the lowest and 5 cards being the highest. Starting with their power rating, I'll give the deck a below average 2 cards, due to the individual main deck monsters not being very strong, and their strongest extra deck monsters having less attack points than one would expect. For adaptability, I'll give the deck a near perfect score of 4 cards, due to the numerous card effects allowing you to account for most situations, provided you can predict your opponent's moves, which isn't that difficult for obvious reasons. And finally, we have recovery, which, unfortunately, also only gets 2 cards. This is due to the deck's need to be equal parts monsters, traps, and field spells. And if the trap cards or the monsters are taken out too soon, setting up a new board could be costly and time-consuming. And that's all for my Ghostrick deck build and strategy guide. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh! And gaming content. Be sure to vote on which of my decks you want to see me do for my next video. And if you think you found a combo here that I haven't gone over, be sure to share it in the comments section. And with that, I'll take my leave. I'll see you all later.